Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Wood Elves against the Dark Elves on the Mortis Wastes, and it's been quite a while since I played Wood Elves, so I really wanted to give them a shake in this matchup, and I've been hearing that with Doomfire Warlocks being implemented, this has become a bit tougher. In this situation my opponent didn't bring them, but I wanted to be ready for them, and wanted to bring a sort of well-rounded build. This is a pretty kite-heavy build, but at the same time I didn't want to invest fully in sort of kiting my opponent out, so I did bring a good chunk of infantry as well. One of the mistakes you will most likely immediately notice is the lack of a caster, though to be quite honest, for this sort of build, I'm not entirely sure you need a caster. The Wood Elves don't have the best damage magic to begin with. Perhaps an Ambush Spear could be decent, but otherwise they don't really have the best magic damage to begin with, so and you don't really need that many heals for this sort of composition, so perhaps it wasn't too much of an issue in retrospect. Regardless, this going over things really quickly, I obviously did bring the Lady. She's mounted on an eagle. This means she can basically outrun anything my opponent tries to chase her with, and she does have, of course, decent poke damage with Arrow Kernus, with her arrows, as well as, of course, Prevanith Thremite, which allows her to root an enemy place and make them easy pickings for your archers. Front line, spread out a bunch, 4 units of Eternal Guard, one of which is the Regiment of Renown Winterheart Guards. These guys do provide courage as well as having a perfect charge bonus, or charge defense, and unbreakable. Yeah, they've got perfect charge bonus, guys. So that 6 is the perfect number of charge bonus. The real strike force, of course, is the shooting, so we've got a bit of a odd setup here. I've got 2 Deepwood Scouts, one of which is Swift Shivers. This is specifically to counter Doomfire Warlocks. Doomfire Warlocks with their 40% missile resist are very tanky. Swift Shiver Shards will hopefully counter that with a lot of magic damage, and they can still do well against Witch Elves, against Sisters of Slaughter. Sisters of Slaughter are a pretty common sight in this matchup, and honestly, just with the raw damage, if we look at the stats, it's 37 missile damage. Yeah, they still do have 4 AP, and they can kind of overwhelm your opponent with just raw damage over time. So even heavily armored troops are potentially at risk. Then we do have some Deepwood Scouts. I have a mirror set up on either end. I vanguarded Deepwood Scouts a little further forward so that if my opponent came charging in, if he came barreling in with a cav, these guys would be the first to soak up the charge, and of course they are much cheaper and much less important overall. Finally, a unit of Way Watchers over here who are on the other flank, mirrored by the Hawkeyes of Drakira. So a bit of AP punch. Perhaps in retrospect I should put both Way Watchers on one side to just get max out of AP, but I kind of wanted to have a bit of AP and a bit of magic on either end. And if my opponent pushed into me, I wanted to be able to collapse the wings of my army inward and get those nice juicy rear shots, especially against light Dark Elf infantry, because going wide is one of the pretty common builds, and with this way, although not having the width of front line, I would have the width with my mobile units. 2 Wild Riders with shields do provide additional protection. It is important to keep in mind that Wild Riders with shields, while having solid melee stats, I do believe actually lose to the Lanish's Harvesters and Doomfire Warlocks when they are hit by their debuffs. With the loss of armor, with the potential drop of Doom Bolts, these guys can actually lose that fight, so it's pretty rough stuff. Now for my opponent, he did decide to go a little bit of an odd build, though definitely pretty solid all things considered. 2 Dark Riders with repeated crossbows are out here in the front. A bit of an odd choice, but they do have AP damage. They can definitely poke at some of the more heavy units that the Wood Elves can put on the field, and in a pinch they can be used as an emergency light cav. Here in the back, a single unit of Cold War Knights is providing some rear protection for what is mostly a artillery-centered mass infantry build. 2 Blackheart Corsairs providing some additional damage against light infantry, which of course is all Wood Elf infantry, except Dryads, I guess. Frontline of Bleak Swords to deal with Eternal Guard, though actually these guys do lose 1-to-1. They will win in basically every other situation, or when they in sort of cost efficiency. Hellbroni, Dread Spears, and then of course 2 pre-propelled throwers who are immediately going to start chipping away at my infantry. 2 Blackguard are a bit of an odd choice here. I don't really think you need the super elite spears against the Elves, against the Wood Elves. But definitely a bit of a nuisance, and of course they do have 100 armor. They do have very good combat stats and immune psychology, so a bit of a nuisance. Over there you can see a magic missile punching through the Bleak Swords, and I do drop a Prevanith Thremite into my opponent's Lord, who is a Sorceress of Shadows. An odd choice on my opponent's part here is putting his Sorcerers on a Cold One. Honestly, I think the Cold One's a terrible mount option for casters. It's very slow. It doesn't really actually improve your melee stats. It gives you AP, but it doesn't give you much in the way of armor. You can see she's still riding almost butt naked on the dinosaur here, so it doesn't give her too much armor, and it really cuts into your mobility, which is your main source of survivability. So I think it's not really worth it. in my opinion. But perhaps my opponent there was hoping to get a little bit of better combat performance, but I definitely wouldn't recommend that. Regardless, she does have Occam's Mind Razor, Pit of Shades, Penumbral Pendulum, and Malkath's Miasma. I don't think the latter two are actually that good, or the higher end ones are that good against Wood Elves, but you never know. Also, Arcane Conduit is very useful. Immediately, you can see me trying to zone out my opponent with some Wild Rider play, as well as pushing forward with my archers, trying to push in and get in a bit of an envelopment. You can see I was trying to knock out these Reaper Bolt Throwers, who are a very important target. Unfortunately, of course, the Swift River Shards have no chance. They have a snowball chance in hell of getting into range, but the Way Watchers and normal scouts can definitely chip away. And now, as my opponent is sort of, you can see we are pushing forward a little bit with their Eternal Guard, and we will start pushing forward properly in a little bit. But you can see we're definitely getting a bit of chip damage, and now as my opponent starts pushing in with the Bleak Swords, we are going to countercharge with Wild Riders. And unfortunately, this is where a Lore of Life caster would have come in useful for these sorts of charges. But we do get some meaty damage here against these guys with their pitiful 30 armor. These guys really can't stand up. Unfortunately, my opponent is going to keep pushing, so I'm going to be forced to pull away because I don't want to get slaughtered by Angry Dread Spears and Bleak Swords. And fortunately, we are a good bit faster than these guys, so it doesn't matter too much. In the meantime, over here, these Bleak Swords definitely feeling their oats a little bit and get run over by Wild Riders. So this is why you don't overextend, kids. They're going to get dumpstered. In the meantime, I'm saving ammo on all of my troops here. You can see none of them wasted too much. But the Reaper Bolt Throwers are still in line. At least one of them is. The other one actually got routed off the field. And my opponent, definitely not in the ideal spot. Over here, you see Bleak Swords kind of pushing past the front. I'm trying to intercept them with the Winterheart Guards, but struggling to do so. Anytime these Eternal Guard will muck up these Bleak Swords and buy me some additional time. And you can see we're going to be able to get on these Bleak Swords, do some damage, and time down. Unfortunately, these annoying Dread Spears are going to keep pushing and keeping a nuisance. Anytime, first blood essentially to the Wood Elf with the Bleak Swords getting wiped out almost completely, probably wasting some of my ammo in the process. One of the big problems, and this is something I would like to see fixed, and something I kind of forgot when I did my what I'd like to see fixed video, is the fact that units, if they are ordered, although they normally don't have, if you turn off free fire and order a unit to attack an enemy unit, it then considers itself to be on free fire mode. And I see this often with Wood Elf archers. You order them to shoot at, and in this case they were ordered to shoot at the Reaper Bolt Thrower, and they're wasting their ammo on Bleak Swords as they're pushing up. So this was an absolutely stupid disaster of an ammo waste. This was not intentional. I was not looking to spitefully kill the last two Bleak Swords here, but it is what happened. Regardless, we are going to push in, pressure these Reaper, and in the meantime, we're going to chip away at this annoying Supreme Sorceress, who is hitting my poor Wild Riders with Malkath's Miasma. Anytime on the periphery, you can see these Eternal Guard buying me time, and here, as my opponent is sort of trying to push into me, trying to disrupt my archers, I'm sort of using my Wild Riders to pick them apart one at a time, shattering them and slaughtering them in the pits. Over here, the Dread Spears, as they push in, are actually going to find themselves under Withering Fire from the behind. Of course, the Hawkeyes of Drakir are simply uncatchable for them. They're way too fast. So definitely a bit of a disaster there for my opponent. And you can see we're just kind of pulling them apart, picking them apart. We do get some chip damage here on the Supreme Sorceress, who has no source of healing, before shifting our... We did drop Brave Anathrema here, which I unfortunately wasn't able to show, but regardless, we're going to start chipping away at this Reaper Bolt Thrower. You can see the crew there not having the time of their lives, riddled around them, just riddled with arrows. You can see this guy's just standing there, all chill with an arrow through his shoulder, but finally the guns are coming offline, and really, although my opponent got some good damage in here on the Deepwood Scouts with Swift Shivers, the Way Watchers and the normal Deepwood Scouts are more than in adequate shape, and the Reaper Bolt Thrower is going to go down here with barely a whimper. Meantime, I was continuously hounding my opponent's Supreme Sorceress, casting Arrow of Kurnus after Arrow of Kurnus on her, trying to knock her out of the fight with my lady. She's, of course, a very susceptible target. And in the meantime, my Wild Riders are swinging around the flank, going for the jugular, or going for the kills there. Unfortunately, my opponent is getting his Reaper Bolt Thrower back online, which is a bit of a disaster for me. But you can see with the crossfire from the archers, having been able to string these guys out, we're able to rout these two units of Bleak Swords. Now, granted, my opponent could have tried to do a little more of a cohesive push, but simple fact is I've got so much crossfire that it's really a tough situation for him. Now, finally, there are a few breaches. You can see over here the Cold War Knights finally do commit. They're going to plow through the center, crush my Eternal Guard, and then crush through these Deepwood Scouts. These poor Eternal Guard over here routed. But rather than giving my opponent the pleasure of wiping out my troops, I'm simply going to pull away with the Way Watchers. I've already pulled these Deepwood Scouts clear, so all the Swift Shivers will get massacred. The Way Watchers are going to be able to just pound away at these Blackguard Corsairs and the Dread Spears. In the meantime, the Blackguard not really being committed. My opponent down to two guns there on the the bolt thrower, and here we are trying to pick off the Enchantress, but it's just not working. Fortunately, there's still so much ammo left. You can see 12 on these Scouts, 17 on the Swift Shivers, 12 on the Hawkeyes. Just so much damage left to be used, and my opponent really just no longer has the troops needed for this. Wild Riders, you definitely committed in a bit of a desperate action. I was hoping to save my turn of guard. Unfortunately, it's just not going to do the trick. The Cold One Knights are going to hold in there. They're very well kitted out to kill Wild Riders, and the Black Guard's going to come in. And so a bit of a micro mistake. I should have pulled them away, but the Black Guard, the Black Corsairs, and the Cold Ones are going to slaughter my poor Wild Riders, who've been doing such an amazing job. So Rudolph, he's been shining bright. He's been doing great, but at this point, it's too little, too late, and I've definitely done goofed here. Fortunately for my opponent, though, we do rout his sorcerers off the field, and the Wild Riders, now having routed off these Reapers, are going to be able to continuously pressure the Dark Riders with their Peter crossbows. In the meantime, the Winter Guard here, tying down the Black Guard, who is not very good at cleaving through infantry, at least not in a time-efficient manner, and we're just melting them with volley after volley of rear shots from our archers, and you can see how much that damage adds up. Even the Black Guard just can't hold up to that. Once they break, their speed's not good enough. They're going to get run down by Winter Guard, and that's over. Unfortunately for me, my opponent does come in here, finally using these Dark Riders in that light cav, emergency light cav roll, pushing in against my Hawkeyes, getting a meaty charge in there. Of course, he's going to get a few kills, but immediately we're going to turn on him, and rather than letting my opponent get away here, the Hawkeyes are going to pop their ace in the hole, good old smoke bomb, tying these guys down, dropping their speed to 23, and they are going to get trapped and massacred by the Wild Riders. So, absolute disaster. My opponent had only a handful of troops left at this point, all of which were very susceptible to my archery. And a Pyrrhic victory to the Wood Elves. Honestly, the only reason that was a Pyrrhic victory, in my opinion, was because I lost this turn guard almost to a man, that single unit of Wild Riders. We still had more than enough troops to wipe out that army to the last Dark Elf. A pretty cool build from, I think, to use this sort of stuff, to use a sort of pseudo kiting build. I think it can work, and I think it works rather well against the Dark Elves, who don't necessarily have the greatest cavalry. Their cavalry, of course, is kind of hamstrung a little bit by their susceptibility to magic damage, which makes Swift Shivers decent. A little hamstrung by their susceptibility to rampage, which potentially you could rampage them into Eternal Guard. But by and large, I definitely think this is a fairly competitive build. You've got cheap archers to shut down enemy, the cheap units that you don't want to be wasting good Waywatcher ammo on. You've got Swift Shiver shards in case you need that magic damage, but at the same time, they've got good enough range to skirmish with Dark Elf shooting. 2 Wild Riders for that sort of peripheral protection, some Eternal Guard. Definitely one of the things I'd considered trying to do is trying to cram a caster in here. I'm not entirely sure how I would do that. Perhaps dropping a normal Eternal Guard and downgrading these guys to the unshielded variant would be the way to do it. That would be the trick. But definitely I would like to have a caster in here. Though not entirely sure what lore. Perhaps Lore of Shadows for the armor debuff. Perhaps, I don't know, Lore of Shadows does sound pretty good. You could bring the minus 30 armor. You could bring in Feebling Foe, Malkos Miasma, all of which are pretty solid. And could help you maximize your value. Regardless, for my opponent's build here, a few odd choices. The Black Guard, the Supreme Sorcerers on a Cold One. I don't think the Supreme Sorcerers all on their own is bad, and I actually don't think my opponent's Magic Loadout was bad either. But I think the Cold One is a terrible Lord Mount. Hero and Lord Mount for casters. Obviously, for someone like Malekith, I think it's great. Because he's combat-oriented. He can stay in a fight. He's got the stats for it. He's great for a Dreadlord. It's solid for those sorts of units. But for a caster, for Supreme Sorceress, it does you almost no good. It's plus 20 armor and AP on a unit that has crap weapon strength and trash armor to begin with. I think she's at like 40 or maybe even less when she's just on a horse. So don't bother with, in my opinion, don't bother with Cold Ones. If you're going for survivability, you're much better off with a horse, in my opinion, just for that mobility. Otherwise, the Dark Riders, a little bit. This was definitely the unshielded units here, or the unshielded expensive units. The Black Guard and to a lesser extent Dark Riders. I think a bit of an odd choice. I think my opponent would have been better off with a few more shielded infantry, maybe some Sisters of Slaughter. But otherwise, definitely not a bad build. Definitely the right direction. Definitely well played. A lot of fun against Karambit here. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below if you've not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them and I will respond as soon as I'm able. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.